brief explanation about this conference, which obviously, as we said, is dedicated to Léon. This is the third edition of this conference. We started this journey 2 years ago with the academia when they started thinking of this idea of developing architecture in their program, since it's the only art that was not covered yet. And that was a conference where we brought here a series of great figures, and we talked in general about the importance of returning to architecture for a merely building process. Last year, where we were supposing to have for the introduction speech as a keynote speaker, Léon, and unfortunately he canceled his presence. The idea was to show to Italian political administrators and architects that an alternative to the ugliness that is affecting the entire planet and also Italy is possible. So we brought here a very large group of the greatest authors of buildings to show real cases from all around the world. We had the honor of having 8 Driehaus prizes present all at once in one conference, and it was an immense success. But every year we try to have a new program. We already thought about at least the next 2 conferences, the first of which will be next year, dedicated to religious architecture, all the religions, obviously. And another one is about restoration, because one of the serious problems we have today, due to the way architecture and restoration are taught in the schools, is that we are damaging and we are losing our heritage due to wrong intervention that are made because of the addiction of one of the many wrong documents that are being proposed. Yesterday, Irene was talking about Léon's speech and the idea of changing laws that are wrong. One of the worst, it's not a law, but a document that has been produced is the Venice Charter. And here at the back we have Matthew Hardy, who edited in 2006 this book that was the result of a very important meeting we had in Venice to propose to rewrite the Venice Charter of 1964, which is this extremely wrong document. So one of the next conference will be aimed at pursuing that achievement. But this conference is talking about architecture, is talking about urbanism. But if we go back with our mind to what was the lesson of Vitruvius, talking about who must be the architect, what must be the personality of the architect, he's talking about a figure that has to know anything that is related with his practice. To be an architect, you need to know many different disciplines, he says. You don't have to exceed in the knowledge of this, but you need to know it. Now we are living in a more complex era where probably the right solution is the multidisciplinary approach. In 2006, I had the honor of having the introduction to one of my books by Léon Krier. The book was called Architecture and Town Planning Operating Instruction. And in that book, in my preface, I wrote some letter that was addressed to a young boy or girl that wants to enroll for the School of Architecture. And I was giving suggestion to read books, and I listed a series of names of urban sociologists. And I said, if this is too complex, maybe you can at least start by reading Tom Wolfe's book From Our House to Our House, that is translated in Italian, Maledetti Architetti, Damn Architects, which is not a nice advertising. And I was giving this suggestion as a vaccination against lobotomy, because that is what is happening, unfortunately, in many schools of architecture. For this reason, this year, instead of talking only about architecture and urbanism, we decided with the academia to involve experts of other disciplines that are studying the side effect of the architects. Because after the dictatorship of the last century, it's time for the architect to shut up and listen the other expert to understand what goes wrong and to understand how to do it. So we are going to have urban sociologists, we're going to have an expert of neuroscience, which is just a little bit of the many disciplines we have to take in consideration for this. So we are not only talking about the beauty, but we are talking about the social disaster that has been caused by the wrong way of making proper architecture. The session that starts today, that starts now, it is dedicated to architecture decorum and the necessity of beauty. And there is a quotation of Cicero that deserves to be read. Cicero defines decorum as what is fitting and consistent with nature, a concept akin to the appropriateness expressed by ancient Greek, prepon, and the notion of giving to each his own unique sum. Applied to architecture, decorum requires that the form, scale, ornamentation, and appearance of a building correspond to its function, social role, and setting, a principle also codified by Vitruvius and much debated today. What do architects owe to places, institutions, and publics? Can beauty still function as a shared civic value, or has it become purely subjective? How does decorum, understood as sustainability, propriety, and ethical restraint, shape architecture from today? Drawing from history, theory, and contemporary practice, this session intends to reconsider whether beauty and decorum are nostalgic ideals or necessary frameworks for meaningful human architecture. So for this reason, we start this session with one of my favorite architects, Maria Fernanda Sànchez, who made this splendid project with Léon Krier and obviously her husband, Pedro Paulo Godoy. And Maria has been, is one of the excellence produced by the University of Notre Dame. And he's a Guatemalan architect and urbanist, co-founder and director of Estudio Urbano, an international recognized practice dedicated to traditional architecture, urbanism, and the creation of human cities. A graduate of the University of Notre Dame with a master's degree in classical architecture, her work explored the relationship between beauty, civic order, cultural continuity, and human flourishing and the built environment. She has played a leading role in the conception and realization of the Ciudad de Cayala, widely regarded as one of the most significant contemporary demonstrations of traditional urbanism and walkable city-making in the 21st century. Developed in close collaboration with Léon Krier, the project has received major international recognition, including the Charter Award from the Congress of New Urbanism and Arthur Ross Award. Sànchez serves on the Advisory Council of the University of Notre Dame School of Architecture, the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation Board, and the Citymaker Collective Board. She also as a member of the Intubao College of Traditional Practitioners under the patronage of King Charles III, where she serves on its selection committee. As a lecturer, juror, and consultant, she contributes internationally to the discourse on architecture, urbanism, and the philosophical foundation of the human cities. Please, Maria Fernanda.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It is a true honor to be here at Villa Falconieri, a place deeply connected to the humanist tradition and to the living memory of Europe, to reflect on a reality that has guided much of our work for many years, the order of being and the order of making. I am deeply grateful for this invitation and especially for the opportunity to participate in this tribute to Léon Krier, whose thought and friendship shaped so much what I will share to you today. Kayala is a tangible, visible, and genuinely inhabitable place. One can walk through its streets, inhabit its plazas, recognize its skyline, and witness the intensity of life unfolding within it. Yet cities such as these are not born merely from technical decisions, market calculations, or stylistic preferences. They emerge from something far deeper, from a vision of reality itself. I now wish to speak of something far less visible, yet absolutely decisive for understanding why that place works. For the city is not simply the setting in which human life unfolds, but the form that shapes, orients, and gives meaning to the life we share together. And this form is not first understood intellectually, it is recognized intuitively, because before we can fully articulate it, we already sense that it responds not only to our physical needs, but also to our spiritual longing for order, beauty, and wholeness. Before we understand a place, we orient ourselves within it. We enter, we walk, we pause. And almost without knowing it, we already know. We know whether a place receives us or pushes us away, whether it orders us or confuses us, whether it allows us to belong or leaves us outside. Here something fundamental appears: order. We encounter it first as an experience. Before thinking about it, we feel it in our bodies, in our movement, in our sense of direction, in the calm or tension of a space. When coherence exists, everyday life flows naturally. Things make sense. People encounter one another with ease, and space supports us. But when coherence is lost, everything becomes harder. We feel disoriented, and life becomes fragmented and hostile. Yet this experience is not merely psychological. It responds to something real, something rooted in the very structure of the world. We perceive this when we recognize proportion in human body, balance in a landscape, or hierarchy in a public square where the church, the civic space, and the main street align naturally. Beneath what we see lies a deeper structure that gives meaning to everything, like the visible laws of music that make a melody harmonious. And at the deepest level, this order reflects how reality itself is constituted, as an intelligible structure that we can perceive, understand, and ultimately long to inhabit. It is not chaos, it is purpose, proportion, and proper relation among parts. It is what gives unity to a body, legibility to a city, and orientation to the human soul. This order of the world is not separate from us. It is reflected in the very nature of human being. We recognize it because we long for meaning, belonging, and coherence, because we ourselves are body, reason, and spirit, distinct, yet profoundly interwoven within a living and indivisible unity. The order of being is simply reality itself, the deep order of all that exists, cosmos, nature, life, and humanity. When that same order becomes visible and experiential to us, we call it the order of the world. And it is this order of being revealed as the world that philosophy names. Architecture, in turn, makes it inhabitable. With this order of being, we distinguish three inseparable dimensions of human experience: beauty, truth, and goodness. Beauty is the way the order of reality becomes visible and meaningful to us. It is the sensible manifestation of that order by which the world presents itself as worthy of love. And in contemplating it, we are elevated and morally oriented toward the good. It is the way order becomes perceptible to our senses, through form, balance, and the fitting together of parts within a whole. When a form truly corresponds to that order, we organize it immediately. Beauty does not require justification, as Léon taught us. When we must explain it, something essential has already been lost. Beauty is a harmony that the soul recognizes before the mind fully understands it. Truth is understanding this order and orienting ourselves within it. Truth makes the world legible. It allows us to discern what is central from what is secondary, to find our way without confusion, and to understand how a place is organized. In a true city, space speaks. We know where we are, we know what matters, we know how to move without losing ourselves. And goodness, understood in its deepest sense, is not merely what keeps us alive, but what enables us to live fully as human beings, and therefore in accordance with our true nature, and therefore what we should all strive for. Goodness is not only what functions, it is what makes dignity, coexistence, encounter, and belonging possible. When space is rightly ordered, common life can flourish. People are able to meet without fear, alienation, or unnecessary friction. Thus, we can say, beauty reveals that there is order. Truth allows us to understand it, and goodness awakens us in the desire to inhabit. So far, I have spoken of order as experience, how the city is lived, perceived, and inhabited. Now, I will turn to order as an act, how the city is conceived and made. If the order of being describes how reality is, the order of making describes how we participate in the reality through our works. The city is therefore not a neutral container of life. It is the visible translation of the order of being into civic form. And architecture is the physical stage that allows that life unfolds. Poor architecture does not simply waken the city. It prevents the human being from flourishing. Tradition formulates its own triad to guide its making: beauty, firmness, and utility. Beauty makes order visible through proportion and harmony. Firmness allows that order to endure through structural soundness. And utility makes it habitable so it may truly serve everyday life. This is why architecture is not merely a technique or construction. It is the art of building with meaning, a form of human participation in the order of creation, translating the meaning of the world into matter, giving form to what is true, presence to what is good, and giving beauty to both. Two orders intersect here: the order of being as it appears in the world, and the order of making through which we shape the city. The city does not create the meaning of the world, it makes it visible. When these two orders align, people respond instinctively. They celebrate, they walk, they remain. They make the place their own, not because they are compelled, but because they recognize themselves within it. In retrospect, I have come to understand our work in Kayala as a continuous dialogue between the order of being and the order of making. But this understanding was not born in abstraction. It emerged through the long, patient, and profoundly human process of designing and building Kayala. And that path would not have been possible without Léon Krier, whose intellectual clarity and generous spirit were deeply present in everything I have described. Pedro and I have the privilege of working with him for more than 2 decades, applying the very principles through which truly humane and inhabitable cities become possible. It was through this close and sustained collaboration that we came to understand the extraordinary coherence and depth of his thought. A continuous dialogue between urban thought, architecture, place, and human dignity. For Léon, the city was never merely an arrangement of buildings, nor an aesthetic exercise, not a technological experiment. It was the physical manifestation of a civilization understanding reality. Léon Krier was far more than an architect, an urbanist, or a theorist. He was a brilliant and provocative thinker, a true humanist, a modern polymath who wove together thought, drawing, philosophy, politics, and urbanism into a vision as coherent as it was radical. His work was a deliberate act of resistance against chaos. Throughout his life, he challenged with elegance and intellectual courage the dogmas that had reduced the city into a functionalist experiment. He understood urbanism as being in continuity with the great classical tradition, seeing it as the noblest form of politics, the art that organizes daily life and creates the conditions for human flourishing. And the deepest truth we learn from him is this: architecture can transform cities, but beauty can transform souls. In an age marked by noise, speed, and growing indifference, Léon Krier was something increasingly rare: a calm presence in a restless world, clarity in a time of confusion, courtesy in an era rapidly forgetting on matters. He taught us that beauty is not an ornament, nor a luxury, nor a matter of taste. Beauty is a form of justice because it dignifies human life, especially the lives of those who have the least. And ugliness, he will say, is never innocent. It wounds quietly. It diminishes the spirit. It erodes our sense of belonging. He used to warn us that viewed from a certain distance and in good light, even an ugly city can appear to be the promised land. But up close, in reality of daily life, ugliness becomes a subtle violence that harms the human soul. Beauty instead reconciles us to the world and to one another. It restores dignity. And it was in this truth, simple and profound, that we understood his mission to heal the world through the beauty of the city. Léon taught that traditional architecture does not contain all solutions. It contains true solutions, refined through centuries by people who understood human nature. Vitruvio's triad, firmitas, utilitas, and venustas, was not a formula to him. It was a moral compass, a whole from which none of the three could be separated without wounding the others. And it is precisely that fracture that has shaped much of the architectural confusion of the past century and that has kept the world debating for the past 100 years. Because usefulness without beauty becomes hostility. Solidity without meaning becomes emptiness. And beauty without truth becomes illusion. Tradition, he said, is not nostalgia. It is accumulated human wisdom. Nostalgia seeks to preserve the past unchanged. Tradition, instead, seeks to understand the principles that made it possible. Tradition is not a museum of styles. It is a living grammar, capable of generating infinite new forms that remain faithful to the human spirit. What emerged from that collaboration was not the imposition of a singular vision, but the convergence of a shared understanding of the city, one that recognized architecture and urbanism as inseparable expressions of the same civic order. We were working from the very core of Léon's thought. Urbanism is the architecture of the city, and architecture is the urbanism of buildings. There is no separation between them. They are one and the same art, a continuous language expressed at different scales, yet ordered toward a common purpose, the dignity of human life. Léon conceived the city as an urbanist who thought like an architect, and we gave form to that vision as architects who thought like urbanists. His urban vision traced the moral structure of the place, and our architecture gave that vision presence, character, and cultural identity. That was the alchemy of our collaboration, and it was through the reciprocity that Kayala emerged, not merely as a project, but as an act of faith, faith in beauty, faith in coherence, faith in dignity, and faith in the possibility that a city could help restore what a society had gradually forgotten. The civilizing principles that once held communities together: urban order, human scale, mixed use, continuity of urban fabric, coherent civic hierarchy, proportion, beauty, and the primacy of civic realm. Léon did not come to Guatemala to impose a foreign model. He came to awaken what we already have, what was already ours: the memory of our vast and beautiful legacy, the wisdom of traditional urban life, the proportions the human hearts still recognize as home. Kayala broke with the dogmas of the 20th century, and by doing so, it reveals something immense to our people and to the world. Beauty is a universal necessity. Order is not oppression, but the essential condition for freedom, community, and the life of the city. And that a well-made city can instruct, reconcile, and elevate an entire nation. In Guatemala, his theory took form, and his vision entered the reality of the built world, sustained here for more than 20 years with a continuity unmatched elsewhere. He was not only a visionary, he was a builder of hope. Beyond his books, his drawings, and the cities he helped shape, Léon leaves us something even more enduring: an awareness that beauty is not superficial, that beauty is a civic duty, that the city is the greatest act of love a society can build, that dignity must be reflected in places we inhabit, that a truly human civilization is still possible if we build it with memory, truth, and hope. To work alongside Léon was not only a professional privilege, but a profoundly human one. because beyond the brilliance of his thought, there was generosity, discipline, fidelity, and a profound love for humanity. In a world increasingly willing to accept ugliness, fragmentation, and disorientation as inevitable, Léon never accepted them. He continued to defend beauty, not as a sentiment, but as a necessity for civilization itself. As he used to say, beauty does not save the cities. It saves the people who live in them. And perhaps that is his greatest legacy, the reminder that a truly human world remains possible if we are willing to build it. Thank you.
I'm really grateful for this profound speech of Maria Fernanda. It is heartbreaking and really it's a wonderful, wonderful memory for Léon. And thanks also for being so precise in time. Today we are challenging time, but today we are also on one hand lucky, on one hand not that lucky. Because unfortunately, one of the greatest speakers that was supposed to talk today, Abd el-Wakil, unfortunately canceled his presence for some health problem. But in any case, we know that next year, as I said, we want to dedicate this conference to religious architecture, and I think he's the greatest a person to be invited to talk about his marvelous project of mosques he has built in continuation with the work of Fatih, that was his master. So due to this change of the program for the absence of Abd el-Wakil, if there are questions for Maria Fernanda, we have some time to talk. And we have to anticipate the coffee break. We have, let's say, half an hour. We will restart at 11:30 instead of restarting at 12, as it was supposed to restart with the intervention of the next speaker, Miriam Rincon. Any questions? Please.
My mission here was also to announce that we've been thinking of what would be the resting place for Léon, and in the end that was Poundbury, because Poundbury was sort of the main model that has then influenced, and also the king is very, very interested in having it there. Of course, now is the Duchy of Cornwall is separated from Crown State, so the whole thing is sort of negotiated with a new team, but they all agree, and we have a fantastic place that was there, like waiting for the statue. The statue is going to be, the statue of, is going to be the bust that many of you may have seen pictures of, that was made by Celia Scott, of idealized head, and the prince had in his Highgrove Gardens and now still has in his other residence. And that is going to have a plinth designed by Liam O'Connor, and then it's going to be placed in the niche of the Queen Mother Square. And to that effect, because now we have the whole design and the whole precise costing, which comes up with installation and all the permits and everything, to £130,000. And I was supposed to announce that the fundraising effect was going to be announced and on the web, and I don't know exactly how, but it will be on June 17th, which is the anniversary of the death of Léon. So then I've been chastised for not having said that. I forgot, and I would like to publicize it here.
Thanks, Irene, for this wonderful news, and I'm eager to see that soon. So.
It's projected to be unveiled because the king wants to be unveiled. And the whole thing will be during the last official visit the king will make to Poundbury. Poundbury, as you know, one of the principles of Leon was that the cities have to have a limit. They have a specific design for a certain number of population for the territory it occupies. So we have the end of the construction of Poundbury for 2028. So that's also the 80th anniversary of King Charles. And they'll be more or less probably around June. The date is not fixed yet, but it'll be an official visit of the king, and probably, of course, Prince Williams will be there too, and it'll be the occasion to unveil the monument to Leon. And everybody will be invited, of course.
We will be there for sure. Thank you, thank you. This is wonderful, wonderful news. I don't know if there are questions. Yes, Lucien.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Maria. That was fantastic. Really beautiful, articulate, and very profound. So interesting. I hope this will be published in even written form, because I think this is such a precise, definition of really what city building is about, and also about legacy of Leon. I wanted to ask something, because we now have, in our contemporary situation, we have a number of really interesting things going on. We have miracles like this place, which, I was so shocked when I come here, shocked in a wonderful way, because I thought, how is it possible that a place like that exists? And I have the same, with Poundbury and Kayala. How is it possible that places, with all the resistance, with all the difficulties, with all the obstruction, they come to life? So my question is, how did Kayala start? How did you, in a place where gated communities are the rule, where the people are scared, because there's this kind of idea that popular places are dangerous. Like, in the United States, downtown is dangerous places. How come that this has been overcome, and what's the origin? What's the beginning? How does this come about?
Okay, I would say that, first of all, it's a matter of conviction, that you are willing not just to build, but to left a legacy. So when we start Kayala, the owners were doing like high-end houses, but they were enclosed by walls. So they were in the world of construction and real estate. We graduated from Notre Dame. We were really with that power that we can change the world. So when we returned to Guatemala, our partner, who is a landscape architect, came to us with this site that was just spectacular, because the city developed all around, but not this site, so it was like a jewel in the middle of the town. And of course, it didn't have, all around was lacking of all the elements for a city. We're just housing and housing and housing. So when we saw the land, we immediately recognized an amazing opportunity to put in stone all that we learned from Notre Dame. And of course, we were young on that time, and we had our first meeting with the clients, and we were trying to convince them with the idea of a legacy, of doing something greater for the next generations. As we thought, we were taught in some point, we have to think about 7 generations from here, not for ourselves. So we had our first meeting, and it was quite difficult because we were young. So immediately we said we need a strategy to convince them. And of course, Léon was in our mind, the best of the best. So we called him without knowing if he was going to accept. And he accepted immediately. That was amazing. So he came for the next meeting, and then we start, Léon convinced there were 3 generations. One that is younger, one that is my age, and one that is older. The youngest generation wanted more to sell the property. My age, they wanted to develop. And the older generation, they were thinking about developing or staying with the property more longer. But at the end, to put these 3 generations together in a single vision was so important. And that is why the first charrette was so important, because we reunite all the family, all the visions, all the intentions. And there was an alignment, for everybody to see a vision. So Léon was crucial for bringing all his knowledge, his talent, his clarity, his charming, everything. And then we started collaboration. And I think that it is possible to do it. It just needs a big will. We have to change what we have today. We are submerged in ugliness. And we need to stop. We need to really stop and think, how can we change the future? Because the present is very upsetting. So we have all tradition behind us, and we need to learn from the past. Bring the jewels to the past, to the present, to secure our future. So I think it's a matter of coordination. It's not a matter of money, because you can build really ugly things with the same amount of money. But you can build beautiful, beautiful places if you really want to do it. So we have to train again all our, this new generation that is coming, as you have been saying here several times. So academies are so important, and that is the value of Academia Vivarium Novum, Notre Dame, and all the other schools that are around that are fighting to have really a better education for architects. And also, to mix with a business school, engineer school, we have to work together again, not a separate education. So I think that it's possible. It's really possible.
So also, because often would be a kind of, I think also often what happened is that when you come with these visions, people say you are dreaming, and you can't do this because you're not making any money. But at the end, Kayala is very successful also economically, and also Poundbury. So all these new projects have been incredibly successful, and even more successful than these failing modernist developments, which in some way have a very short lifespan and very little economical, success.
Absolutely. Try to imagine, the owners didn't sell the main street. So the patrimony that they have today is just spectacular. And it elevated completely the price of the land in that site. Now it's one of the most highest, how do you say it in English, highest prices of land, real estate value in Guatemala.
More sought after.
Yeah, it changed completely the game. And the amount of work that a city produces, so it's not just an economical winning scheme. It's to give work to so many people, to raise a community again together, to have traditions on the streets, like the flower carpets that we have on Holy Week, that brings community together, concerts, choir competitions, so many things that were not happening on that area and on the city of Guatemala. So I think that we should have more clients that believe on cities, because cities are just a way of raising our civilization to another level, I would say.
Léon was saying that the most important achievement was that Guatemala was going the American way of having, gated communities and the society fragmented and rich and power rivalries, more and more violent. And the main important thing, he was very aware that he was compromising because the construction had to be regular industrial construction, but at least you would keep the shape, the volume, and the public space. What he was really keen on is preserving the public space. And he made this equation at some point saying, public space equals common good. Very few people realize how much those are intertwined, because the public space is where the citoyens and everybody else from all over Guatemala now comes, as you've seen in the pictures, for all those events, because they didn't have public space anymore. The graded center of the city was abandoned, basically, because it was too difficult to, but instead Guatemala is giving this theatrical opportunity for all the events that the community needs to organize. Anyway, and the church was very important too.
Oh, yes. Yes. My parents, they walk in the city, my grandparents also. But my generation has been trapped in a car. So, because of suburban sprawl and how the cities have evolved. And my kids also were trapped in a car. So, I have seen these 23 years in an evolution that you cannot imagine. One of the questions that one of my kids did to me after maybe 11 or 12 years working hard against everything, he said, "Why is not bigger? Why is so small?" So try to imagine in the mind of a kid, they love to walk. They love to really, it's in our blood to be social. It's in our blood to have these encounters and to fulfill our souls in a day. Just contemplation. It's not just working or sleeping, but contemplate also. It's part of our life. And we need those spaces. That is why we need beautiful spaces, spaces for us to be complete, I would say. And of course, the church was very important in Cayala. It is the core of the town. Try to imagine every Saturday and Sunday, 800 people at Mass, twice per day. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And I can speak in another level, maybe more cold. Try to imagine the restaurants after Mass. They are fulfilled. So you can see it in different aspects, like the sacred present, but it raises your spirit. It is so important, and we have forgotten the sacred on the cities. So we have to bring back again the most hierarchical building that elevates our soul and makes us being better and have better manners,
Yeah, this is quite interesting, extremely interesting debate that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that many times we need to listen experts of other disciplines to understand not only something that is important, but also to realize how we have been hypnotized by a series of lies that have been said and up to becoming perceived as a true. This idea of the gated city, I can't forget my experience at the CNU in Seattle a few years ago, where I was shocked because I went to a session that was called Diversity in Urban Design, and I thought, new urbanists are doing something that is not only the transect. And this session was celebrating as a fantastic achievement, the creation of the district for the Latinos, the district for the Black community, which is the death of the city. And the gated city are consequences of this absurd idea that the downtown is dangerous. If we read Jane Jacobs in 1961, she's perfectly making a picture that is a slap on the face of the architect on those days that they were saying that historical city were dangerous and modern district were safe. And she found and she demonstrated exactly the opposite. And it's simply necessary for ours in Europe to go to France and see what happened with the French banlieue. When you park some low-income people, you crystallize the problems, while 100 years ago in Testaccio in Rome, they realized that the only way to prevent the crimes, and the violence, and the bitterness is to facilitate the integration of social classes. That's why, to me, it's fundamentally important to understand the important role of urban sociologists in order to be free from this absurdity that have been made in the last century, and this incredible achievement of Kayala, that is no longer the idea of a gated city in a place that was addicted on this type. To me, it's one of the greatest things to be taken in consideration. And then we have other examples in Europe, like Le Plessis-Robinson, we have seen last year. We invited the mayor, Philippe Mézec, or we have Pambury, we spoke already about that. We have Brandevoort in the Netherlands, made by Léon Krier, where I collaborated with my students, realizing 2 large blocks. These are places that are existing, are the real demonstration of what we can do. And obviously, all of this goes back to the great intuition that yesterday we have seen, made in 1983, but even earlier by Léon, and the way his intuition was at the very beginning spread like little seeds. And now, finally, we have the plants from these seeds. So thank you all. If there are no other questions, we can have the coffee break, and we will be back here in 15 minutes. Okay, I think it's time to restart. And since, unfortunately, as I said, we don't have the honor of having Abdel El Wakil today, we will restart with one of our former students. It seems like we produce a lot of monsters in Notre Dame. Beautiful monsters, by the way. This is a very special speech because Miriam Rincon was one of my former graduate students. Last year was awarded with this special prize. We decided to create together with the conference last year and this year, where we will announce the winner of the competition of this year. Miriam won the first prize for her urban design project that she's going to present. Miriam is an architect and urbanism, and the firm Mullen Polyzoides in the US. She's also project lead for Intbao, Mexico, and has been awarded the first prize for urban design in the contest Young Talents in Classical Architecture, organized by the Accademia Vivarium Novum last year. So please, Miriam, the stage is yours.
How can I? Is this height okay? Can you hear me? Better? I'm not that small. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I will tell the story as I go along, of small cities no less than of great. Most of those which were great once are small today, and those which in my own lifetime have grown to greatness were small enough in the great days. Herodotus. Mexico City is not a static urban structure, but a dynamic living organism shaped by a complex web of interdependent systems. The intricate relationship between urbanization and agriculture is a connection often overlooked in modern city planning. This is Xochimilco in Mexico City. This is Xochimilco as well. This is the hunting on the lagoon and two Venetian ladies in Venice. This is the Vitruvian Man by Francesco Di Giorgio, and it showcases the organic structure of a town. So you can see the head or the institute, then you can see the heart or the religious center, and you can see also the stomach. You can see as well the arms, the working arms and the working legs of a man. Xochimilco has, between many things, the ajolote. The ajolote is one of the endemic species that is endangered today. So I don't know if many of you know the structure of Mexico City or how it is located, but you see, can I point out? Okay. So all of this area is composed by 22 million people today. And the foundation of Mexico City was through Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was founded on a lake. So you see on blue, this is the lake. It was conformed by 5 lakes, most of which were salty. So in the 15th century, they were divided. So they separated the salty water from the sweet water. And what made Tenochtitlan so great is that it was attached to Xochimilco. Xochimilco is right here at the bottom. And what happened is that it grew so much. It was a 300,000 population by the 1500s, which by that time was pretty big. It wasn't just like any town. And it was so big because they worked together. So it was Xochimilco and Tenochtitlan working together as one. This is Xochimilco. And you can see on white the canals and the water bodies that conform Xochimilco. So Xochimilco has these man-made islands that are called chinampas. And what makes the scenery so special is that it's not just natural, but it is actually man-made, as I just said. So this is Xochimilco as well in the morning. This is Tenochtitlan during the 500s, 1500s. And you can see it's a city that is made on top of the water, or built on top of waters. That is the beginning of Xochimilco. So it is an island made by human creation. And you can see how it is divided by quarters. And they all are, they have housing, they have also the religious centers. But this is what fed 300,000 population at the time. Xochimilco, here, Mexico City today. So yeah, this is Mexico City on the 1800s. So you could still get the food from Xochimilco into the city by that time. This is a typical chinampa. And so how did they used to build these man-made islands? Well, what they used to do is that they would dig, it was a lake, but it was called five-lake basin because it was more like a swamp. So in the dry season, it would dry up and be composed of 5 different lakes. But then when it was the wet season, I guess, the rain season, then it would become one, right? So it is actually not that deep, but it works because what they do still today is that they dig from the bottom of the lake, they dig all this organic material that is very enriched by all and mineralized by all the mountain ranges that surround Mexico City. And so they dig and they put all this organic material next to it, making canals, right? And so once they put this super enriched food and organic material, what happens is that everything that they grow is very easily grown, right? Because it's always surrounded by water. It has the best food it can have. And so what happens is that they have actually 5 harvests a year instead of 2. So that's how they grew 300,000 to 300,000. This is a section through a typical man-made island. So you can see it's not depicted in this image, but in some images you can see how these islands are actually floating. And so another part of this process is that after they would dig this organic material and put it on the side, they would add these small pieces of wood in the edge of each island. And this would grow, eventually would grow roots that would anchor each island into the bottom of the lake. And that is how they achieve this large system of agriculture. Another thing that I should note is that it is a symbiotic relationship between nature and human needs. So also what happened is that actually the crop inside each island would work in favor. So what they did is that they would only add species that would feed into another, right? So they would add, let's say, they would have the corn or maize, and then they would put beans that would add nitrogen into the crops. Then afterwards, they would add, how do you call chile? Peperoncini? Peperoncini to make all the insects away, yeah, or repel all the insects. And so also all the leaves that will fall from the branches would make all the humidity and moisture and stay in the crop. So they didn't actually have to water the crops. It's actually pretty intelligent technology, because people have told me this is not technology. I mean, I would think twice before saying that, because you don't need, technology is not about wires. I mean, this is pretty awesome. This is Xochimilco, the last century. This is Xochimilco as well. So you can see someone that has just harvested some organic material from it, and I mean, the landscape is just incredible. This is Mexico City, reclaiming its way. So the water wants to come back. Today, Mexico City is sinking, and it's sinking 1 foot a year, which is too much. 1 foot away a year, 30 centimeters a year. Yeah, it is a lot. So what happens is that when the Spanish came into Mexico, they didn't fully understand the foundations of the city, literally the foundations. So they started just filling in all the canals, and then they constructed on top of the pyramids or the existing town. And so this is happening today, and it's an issue that we have. You can see it's pretty unstable. This is in downtown Mexico City, taken last year. I mean, if you go to the main cathedral in Mexico City, you're gonna feel dizzy because you feel like, I don't know, like things are shifting and moving all the time, but that's Mexico today, right? That was taken last year, in, I think it was June. So around this time. Yeah, Ettore is afraid because he's going to the summer school and he might encounter that. But the water is reclaiming its place. And the thing is that, as I said before, cities are a dynamic, especially Mexico City is a dynamic living structure. It's not static. So it could have been this, but we have that. So as I said before, these are the canal structure that we have today in Mexico City. And you can see in some parts of Xochimilco, like this one or this, we do not have as many canals as the southern part. And what is happening today is that there's an enormous pressure to take over this land. I mean, 22 million people. Of course, they want to take over this, right? But then, how did they used to live before, right? Because what happened before is that they used to live in the same place where they used to grow their food. So this is a proposal for the recovery of Xochimilco. And what I'm proposing as a first phase is to add and enhance the water body around Xochimilco. And then as time passes by, adding more canals into the urban structure. Also, what I'm proposing is an urban model for Xochimilco. So it could be repeated at least in this plan, which is the first stage, repeated 3 times throughout. So first one, it would be the Institute Town. Then we would have the Governance Town, and then the town for the craftsmen. The town of the craftsmen is where people that want to visit this heritage can do it with, some rules and code, of course. Then the governance is the one that is in charge of taking care of that all of this code is actually enforced. And then the Institute Town, just imagine these older generations that have all this knowledge and how they are losing it today. So it is about bringing families together again, right? Because owning a plot here means that your family owns that plot. And then if they own that lot, then they knew how to grow food on it. So what happened in Mexico City in the 1980s is that UNESCO World Heritage declared it as a World Heritage Site. And so people could no longer live within Xochimilco, which is actually going against the whole idea of having a chinampa or an island man-made where you could grow your own food and sell it, right? So that made people feel disconnected from their own land. Also, what happens now is that we have these informal settlements, and these informal settlements are encroaching into Xochimilco. So what happens is that they are dumping all the wastewater into these canals. Yes, so this is the proposal for the urban model for Xochimilco, for the institute in Xochimilco. So this part is the institute, which I will go further in later on. And it is a quarter of a mile, and then it also has this heart or religious center. And then it has a market. And so you can come in with your boat, fill in your boat, and sell it to the city. It is similar to the organic town of Francesco di Giorgio. So it has the market, right? So it's the stomach. It has also the church, which is the heart of the town. And then it has also the head, or the institute, right? So these main activities are what would keep this town alive. Also the working hands and legs of the Vitruvian men. Xochimilco is organic to the core. And it has this organic growth as well. So what happens here is that you have the institute, which is teaching the new generations how to grow again, how to make these islands. And so it starts regenerating the area along it. And then the second phase, it is the development into a village, right, with the religious center on it, which would be this, and also houses the people that are studying there and harvesting the land. And then you can see on the third phase, it is the beginning of a town with a retail and wholesale market. So it is the top part that I was talking about before. So it is organic to the core. This is the market. So it functions as a stoa. So you come in with your boat, as I said before, and you load it up and you continue on. Then this is a boatyard, and boatyard is where you construct the boats, I guess. So there's a small forest on the top that fits into this boatyard, and then they're connected by this piazza that has a bridge that goes over the main canal. This is a view of the arrival to the market. This is the boatyard that's right above the market. And then this is when you're walking into the market and you encounter the piazza, you see at the end the market on the other side of the. Then this is the other part of the urban proposal. And then you can see the church right there that opens up into this piazza, right? And you can also see these secondary canals going through. So those function, and I'll go in deeper later on, but those function as a transportation system for the people that live there. Because you only walk through this. This is only a walking urban model. Then all the houses. For the houses, the typology of the houses, what I used is today, Mexico is arranged into courtyard houses, but they are shared. So these shared courtyard houses, you can see them there, and they have on the back their own, and on the back they have their chinampa system. And what happens with the wastewater is that there is a 4-stage marsh system that helps to clean up the water, and then before reaching out the main canals, it is dumped, right? It is cleaned, I'm sorry. This is a typical canal. Oh no, this is the arrival, sorry. Well, this is how the piazza and the arrival to the core of the town would look like if you're walking towards it. So these are the 3 neighborhoods that compose this urban model, and then it is like around 400 meters radius. So it is a quarter of the new urbanism neighborhood. And then finally, this is the lowest part of the urban model, and you can see the institute. It is also the arrival to the institute is through this piazza, and then there is like a gateway, so you can see through it and see all the chinampas at the back as a landscape. So on the left, we have the right-of-way for the pedestrian, and then you can see the waterways on the second image. So those are both ways. And then on the third image, you can see that in purple, well, these are only for the endemic species of Xochimilco. So the idea is to regenerate the endemic species that are endangered today, because in the 90s, they added carp into this lake system. And so what happened is that the carps started eating all the endemic animals, which is fabulous because, I mean, you have a place that you can harvest 5 times a year, but yet you say that people are starving. I mean, so this is what happens. It is a very delicate ecosystem. And so the endemic species are going to be separated from this, and then from these species that are making them endangered. Mm-hmm. This is an example of the waterways. So you can see the secondary canals, right? The primary canals that are around 25 meters long or wide, and then the secondary canals are around 10. And then the tertiary canals, you can see them here. So what is important to note is that Xochimilco is 120 square kilometers, so it's pretty large. And what happens is that they stopped harvesting because they were not living in the same lot, right? So to get to your house, from your house to the lot, it would take you around 3 hours. And then, of course, you have to do all these agricultural activities, which make it even more difficult for the people that are actually trying to work the land. These are the house typologies. So you can see that all of them have the chinampas on the back. Some of it is for their own consume, and then the other one is for them to sell. This is the institute, the plan of the institute. So the institute is organized by courtyards. Call them regular courtyards or water courtyards. So you have the administration courtyard, and then the library, and then the service courtyard. Also, this is the area where they load and they load into the restaurant, and so they can feed, everyone. I mean, if they have to bring from another harvest. They also have, they can leave their boat here and then just attend any classes. And then finally, there's these areas where they have the endemic species. Here's a pond where ajolotes can happily live without being eaten. All right. This is a section, bear with me, please, it's a bit heavy. A section through this institute. So you can see how the water relates with the institute. And so they have the labs, and this is where they would be learning about Xochimilco itself, within Xochimilco, not outside Xochimilco. This is another section of the institute. And so you can see the courtyards and how they are ventilating the area. This is how you would approach the institute, so looking through those gateways, and then You have these tertiary canals, so you can see they're pretty small and shallow. Xochimilco today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, for this marvelous presentation, and I think you can understand the reason why. Last year, we decided to give the Urban Award to this young architect. I forgot to say that the meaning of this competition, the meaning of having here Miriam, the meaning of having here Sam and other young people is also because we are talking about the legacy of Léon and the fact that this movement is not made of dinosaurs, but this is a movement that is growing and growing and growing, especially thanks to the advent of the web that changed completely the way of talking about urbanism and architecture today. For many, many years, we were victims of the domination of magazines that were sponsored by the industry of construction, and they were preventing the publication, as we heard also yesterday, of projects of classical, traditional urbanism and architecture. The web now is free, and the amount of websites that are talking about proper way of making architecture and urbanism is growing constantly. And I think it's time to leave the stage to all these young practitioners or students. And so this is just the beginning of something we're going to see. But now I have to introduce the second speaker, which is Jonathan Weatherill. As he already said yesterday, we have been friends for good 30 years. We collaborated in some projects. We are teaching together at the University of Notre Dame. And we led together the summer school last year in Oaxaca, Mexico, and 2 weeks ago here in Frascati. Jonathan is a classical traditional urbanist architecture, as all of ours started his career with some modernistic background imposed by the school where he studied. But then he started working, he moved to Italy, and he started working with Piercarlo Bontempi, when even Piercarlo Bontempi was working in a modern manner. But then it was this great epiphany, and they started making a series of great projects. So I would like to welcome Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ettore, and thank you, Miriam, for this wonderful presentation, which I had seen before, but even the more you see it, the better it is. It's really exceptional, fantastic, and it's what we're about. So I gave this title, The Importance of Belonging, so it would allow me to talk about anything, really. But it's very important. The importance of belonging is very, very important, and I'll show you why. It's what is belonging. This is sort of generic Oxford Dictionary definition: feeling of being comfortable and happy in a particular situation or place as well, or with a particular group of people and being treated as a full member of the group. Now, this is not a very complete description, and it could lead to some misunderstanding. So the need for a sense of belonging, if the individual is not recognized, can lead to catastrophic consequences. I mean, this was enabled because a large number of people, not everyone, but a large number of people felt the need to belong, and they followed a current which caused disaster. So to be a bit more precise, this is the Oxford Review, and it just shows up. It's actually it's from a dictionary of what you call DEI, which is this very woke sort of movement of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, which is the opposite of what we just saw previously. So the sense of belonging can lead to very, very, very varied outcomes. So the sense of acceptance individuals experience within a group or organization, it encompasses feeling valued, respected, and understood for one's unique identity. This is important. You're part of a group, but you also have your own identity. When individuals feel a strong sense of belonging, they are more likely to engage actively, collaborate effectively, and contribute positively to their environment or their place as well. This is really very important. So as Maria Sanchez just said, a place is successful. You can see that the place is successful because when a place is successful, the people make the place their own because they recognize themselves within it. So this is important. These are generic belonging, woke images just for you to look at. But this is someone making the place their own. This is a real place in Wales, in an English, sort of anonymous English terraced house street. It's quite a famous house now, all pink with the green roof and garden gnomes, and someone expressing their identity, but feeling comfortable doing that. Léon Krier also kind of appropriated. He was very interested in Le Corbusier. He admired Le Corbusier greatly to a certain extent. Also, he appropriated Le Corbusier, as Lucien showed us in some of his slides yesterday. But we don't need Léon Krier to do this for us, to Le Corbusier's houses. The people who live in it themselves do this. This is the original. So on the left you have Le Corbusier's original building, and then how it became when people started to live in it. So they were able to expressed their identity and appropriated it for themselves. And I'm not going to talk so much about places like Seaside, which are fantastic. Seaside is a beautiful place. There's no doubting that. But what I'm going to talk about really are places for, as Maria also said, for people who have nothing. People who have very little, because 98% of the world's population doesn't really have the luxury to choose where to live. If you have money, you can choose a place and you can buy a place where you feel at home, and everything is easy. If you don't have the money, it's imposed on you. And this imposition is what has led to the situation we have today. So these are the people we're dealing with that have nowhere else to live but here. So why have we arrived at this? This is obviously a very inhumane environment, which has also been, personalized to some extent. Someone has painted this blue, someone has painted this red, someone has a Dior. It's a little bit personalized as much as possible. How did this happen? Well, before, throughout history, this is in Lazio, this is actually in Rome. As Luigi also mentioned yesterday morning, people lived in the countryside. They lived in rural buildings. This is a rural agricultural medieval building in Rome where dozens of people would be living, and they would be belonging to this place. There's no doubt about it. People in England, in the countryside, before moving to the cities, lived in small towns like Shaftesbury. And people from this area of this countryside in Dorset in England are the same people that colonized the country where I was born, which is Bermuda. And they took their local traditions and they adapted them to the local materials. And they produced places where they could belong as well, with a very clear identity. And then what happened? You have the Industrial Revolution. This changes everything. You have very, very densely inhabited cities. People move to the city, you have pollution, smoke, very small amount of space. You have small working class terrace houses. These are the first examples of housing and places for the poor, for people who don't have a choice, but they come into the city to make a living, and this is where they live. And now we see these places, and at the time, this is what they had. And the thing is, people are never really content with what they have. At the time, this was not an attractive place to live. Here you have a metamorphosis of development, starting with these houses here actually have little backyards and privies, and they're single row houses. What you have here in the foreground that they're starting to build in this picture are what you call back-to-backs. So these don't even have backyards. They're two houses, each of these chimneys, this is one house, this is another house, and they're back-to-back. So there's no through ventilation. And they don't even have a bathroom. They have to go outside, around the corner, and down across the courtyard over here to go to the bathroom. This was a huge issue in cities in the 19th century. Birmingham was obviously redeveloped post-war, and they tore all these buildings down. They kept one here, one little block of back-to-back houses as a museum here. So here you can see what it would have looked like. And it looks quite nice, actually, and it's a nice courtyard. But obviously there was no through ventilation. You had to go outside to the privy. Here's the plan of that courtyard. We have house, 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 all in 2 stories. And then you have to go out of the door, through the passageway, into the back, and you do everything you need to do back there. So there was a movement to get rid of this. These were slums. These were the slums of London, of England. This was a Europe-wide problem. This is a plan showing the arrangement of back-to-back houses and the remoteness and exposure of the privies, which are at the end of this courtyard. So these people have to go out and through and back. Also, the deficiency of accommodation for the decent separation of the sexes. So very socially, very, very uncomfortable place to live at the time. And we have newspaper articles. Now, this is post-war Britain. This is when the real change happened. And you have a conservative politician here who's actually going on the news and having his picture taken while he's actually taking a sledgehammer and demolishing these houses. And this is Steen Eiler Rasmussen's London, the Living City, which is a fantastic book of the history of London. And he's Scandinavian, and he's kind of snarky about the English, because in Scandinavia, in Copenhagen, in Denmark, these are not considered to be slums. These are town flats. In London, the same kind of environment is really not liked. It's looked down upon. So he shows these 2 images of Old Bermondsey in South London from the same location. This is pre-war, what it looked like, and looking back, this is obviously very nice. You have lots of little gardens and houses, but all of these, the main problem in England, and still today, is England has terrible plumbing. And you have these hot and cold taps, which aren't even together, one on one side of the sink, one on the other side of the sink. But then they didn't have bathrooms. They had to go out, down the back of the garden, and into a hole in the ground. So post-war, all of this was torn down. It was replaced with this nice, new, shiny, clean building here. And this is the beginning of the end, of course. This is before real rationalism, brutalism hits. But then you have people like Erno Goldfinger. Erno Goldfinger builds 2 towers in London, the Trellick Tower and Balfron Tower. And this is the Trellick Tower, which you can see in the background, and you can see in the foreground, lower middle class houses. Ian Fleming's famous James Bond bad guy, Goldfinger, was named specifically after the architect, because Ian Fleming lived in front of one of these buildings and hated it so much. And this really is the architect, social engineering. They've got rid of the old Victorian slums, and this is social engineering. And Erno Goldfinger deliberately built his buildings to remind the people that lived in them how miserable they were. He was deliberately, it was deliberately psychopathic move. And now, of course, they are actually sought after apartments by designers and advertising executives. This has all been privatized, they've all been sold. The people that didn't choose to live in them have sold them, and the people that choose to live in them can go and do that if they want to. It's a free country. In Italy, we have this, this sort of building was taken as an example. In Italy, we have, of course, the famous Corviale, which is Ettore's famous, favorite building. The outside is bad enough. This is a 1 kilometer long social housing. This is housing for the poor. This is what it looks like inside. This is a picture of people on the ground, just spending time there. The worst is, the next picture is really quite shocking. It's the interior light well and courtyard of the Corviale looks like this. This is where you're making people live in this place. And this is another one in Naples called Scampia, which is actually now being torn down. And you see social engineering, you have these streets in the sky. Nothing is accessible. I mean, there's a ramp and stairs to go everywhere. There's nothing flat. This is what it looks like inside. This is where you're making people live. You know, you're completely removing their dignity, removing their humanity and their identity. And yesterday we heard that the modern buildings are individualist. In some ways they are. If you're doing a big, building like the Guggenheim in Bilbao by Frank Gehry, that's an individualist building. But most of modernist buildings for the poor were removing identity, removing humanity. And so, I mean, whether you make people live in this place or whether you make them live in this place, it's the same. You know, this is Sollicciano in Florence. This is probably Europe's worst prison. It's absolutely terrifying. It looks really like something out of a dystopic movie. But it's the same. There's no difference between this, where you're living, making people live, or this, where you're locking them up. And you're not going to reform anyone by putting them here. But actually, the interior of this is people in the prison hanging out, and like the people in Corviale. The inside is relatively, maybe preferable to Corviale, if I'm honest. And of course, all of these examples make the movie set for Hunger Games. This is where Hunger Games was, the famous dystopic movie was actually filmed. This is the Abraxas Gardens by Weatherill outside Paris in Noisy. It looks almost cute in comparison. It's obviously not, but you can almost identify with this place. So what do we do about this? What do we do? What happened? There was an alternative movement, and it was also a reaction to the slums of the Victorian age. And what was born out of the slums of the Victorian age was the Garden City movement by Ebenezer Howard, who wrote his manifesto in 1898. And he proposed combining the benefits of the city and the benefits of the country. So work, social activity, entertainment, and peace and quiet, clean air, greenery, countryside. And he made these diagrams, which obviously they're abstract. No one actually built a city like this, but showing almost the kind of Léon Krier little neighborhoods with greenery between them, transit, factories. This is a zoomed-in portion of that. And then the first of these towns to be built was Letchworth. Letchworth Garden City was built in 1903 and planned by Parker and Unwin. And what did they do here? This is very interesting. They created an identity. They took examples from rural English architecture and they made towns with cottages and gardens, each with this is a town hall. These are more houses in Letchworth, each with a very distinct rural arts and crafts identity. This is the typical early 1900s Edwardian arts and crafts architecture. Very, very, very pleasant. And this is not for rich people. This is affordable housing at the time. And you had industry as well. You had this bus factory, the Spirella Company of Great Britain, which no one remembers anymore, but was based in Letchworth Garden City. I'm only going to show you one garden city. There were several that were made. There was Welwyn Garden City. And then in 1906, Henrietta Barnett and her husband had this land in Golders Green off Finchley Road in northern London. And they made Hampstead Gardens suburb. And it's very interesting because it's beautiful, but the key word, you see, is this, suburb. It's no longer city. It's no longer garden city, it's garden suburb. So this is the first example of someone seeing a successful model and then taking out bits of it that they don't think they need. So you don't have You have a bit of retail frontage on Finchley Road, because it's already there, but the rest is just residential. There are churches, 2 churches and a school. Otherwise, it's just houses. And this is no longer affordable. This is Finchley Road. It's very, very interesting, very beautiful. These are my photos from last year. Finchley Road again. And then you go off the road and you're into the garden suburb. And you have these kind of almshouse courtyards. But these are all quite expensive houses. I mean, very expensive now. But when they were built, they were upscale. They weren't for poor people. So this is already a developer commercial model. This is the school, the Henrietta Bardent School. And then you have 2 churches. You have the Free Church on one side, and you have St. Jude's Church on the other side, both designed by Lutyens. They're beautiful buildings. A bit dark inside, but very interesting. But the key thing is that it's a developer project. It's no longer a city for people. It's made to make money, and you're taking things out of it which you don't want to spend on. And eventually what happens is that garden suburb model degenerates, and all the good parts are taken out of it, all the retail is taken out of it, the mixed use, and it just becomes houses, 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 and this is what you end up with. This is what you end up with throughout England, throughout the United States. In Italy, there's an example which is actually this is very key to what I'm talking about. This is a very good example because the Garbatella was built in 1920, planned by Gustavo Giovannone, Innocenzo Sabatini, and others. And this was a new garden city. When this was built in Rome, there was nothing around it. There was St. Paul outside the walls over here. This was countryside. It was built originally for people who were supposed to be working in the new port of Rome, which is this is Church of St. Paul outside the walls. They were going to build a huge canal and have a container port in the center of Rome. They never built that, but what they did is when Mussolini demolished the houses around the Forum, all the people from that were moved to the Garbatella. So the Garbatella was designed and built as social housing. This was built for poor people who didn't have a choice. They did not choose to live there. And this is what they got. And it was the incredibly constructive work of the sort of golden age of Roman architecture in the early 20th century. Plinio Marconi, Camillo Palmarini, Sabatini, Piacentini, and so forth, who all collaborated together, and they made the best examples of social housing, I think, which were ever made. And Ettore can tell you much more about this. These were built in 1920. It's now 100 years later. Very little maintenance has been done to them. You can see they're falling apart. They're not in great shape. What they did, though, is they did the same thing that happened in the garden cities in England, in Letchworth and Welwyn. They did research of typologies, and they created an architecture specifically for the Garbatella, which then became known as Barocchetto Romano, as a new style, and then was developed further in the 1920s and 30s until rationalism took over, unfortunately. But they created an identity, a character which is very strong. And the thing is that this character is still present. These houses are not in the best of shapes. It's social housing. It's very, very, very cheap to make, very, very low cost building. But the people who live here, you see, you have these rural farmhouse typologies. You have inner courtyards which are open. The people who live here belong to the place. They really do. They really are proud of it. The present Premier of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, came from the Garbatella, and she's proud to say she's from the Garbatella. The people who live in the Corviale, as Ettore will tell us, when they were asked where they would like to live, they said, we would like to live in the Garbatella. Move us to the Garbatella. We want to live in the Garbatella. Everyone who lives in the Garbatella is proud of it. You walk around it, you don't feel in danger. If you walk around the Corviale or Scampia, you can't even go to Scampia. The police can't go to Scampia. It's terrifying. You walk around the Garbatella, the people are welcoming. They're happy to have people come and see their neighborhood because they're proud of it. And as you say, they make the place their own because they recognize themselves in it. And as Maria said, beauty. It's not fancy. It's very, very cheap architecture, very simple. But the beauty of it ennobles people who live in it because it gives them dignity. This is really, really important for people, for the majority of the population. We can build beautiful houses for the rich, you know, that's easy and they can pay for it. But for the people that can't pay, they also have a right to this. And this is really key. So, I mean, the Garbatella is a very, very interesting, very engaging and a successful example of how you can make a place very low cost, very sustainable, very low maintenance, and successful. So I'm very, very briefly going to show you some projects of mine. This one you've seen, all of you have probably seen this too many times, so I'll show you very little of it. But because Luigi mentioned it yesterday morning, I'll show you one picture. This is a town outside Milan called Rozzano, which was in the middle of the countryside. It was built in the 60s and 70s to house immigrants from southern Italy who were looking for work. And it went from 3,000 inhabitants to 37,000 inhabitants in the space of 10, 15 years. And all the houses that were built look like this. They actually literally used the Soviet model of prefabricated, precast, reinforced concrete. This is some shops in the middle of the block which have failed, obviously, because it's absolutely dystopic and horrible. And I'm still working, and it should be under construction within a year, on 2 new neighborhoods for this town, where the idea is that these buildings, because they are reinforced concrete, have reached the end of their life. They will be torn down gradually, and people will be moved into new town, new real town. So this is what I designed. This is one of the neighborhoods. This is in the north. Small neighborhood of about 120 apartments on an old sports field, which is decommissioned. So this, again, what I did was a very long, I know the area, I've known the area for 20, 30 years. So I have a good database of examples of local architecture. So Rozzano doesn't have any of this. I created, a new traditional architecture for people to live in, for them to feel identified with. And even if they're coming from southern Italy, it doesn't have to look like southern Italy architecture, but has to look like architecture of a place where people can belong. So this is a fundamental part of my work, and always has been. Mine and Piercarlo's work together. This is a charrette we did in 2024 in Ukraine with Marianne Cusato, with Tomasz Jelinski from Poland and others. We went to a small town about an hour east of Leopoli, of Lviv, called Zolochiv. It's a town which wasn't bombed very, very heavily, but it has issues to deal with that needed repair. And so we used this town as a case study of how Ukraine's towns can be rebuilt, not just repairing the damage of the war, but also repairing the damage of the past, which is very present in Zolochiv, because with Soviet occupation, the Soviets built these houses throughout the town, and they removed the identity of the people. The people, this is near the center of the town, but there are many housing blocks like this, large, the same kind of thing as Rozzano, Soviet prefabricated, precast, modular concrete. And you can sort of begin to see how people have appropriated it here and there by covering the balconies, painting different colors. This is in color. This doesn't show too much, but the residents actually, they dedicate a lot of energy and attention to the gardens, because they don't feel at home in these houses. The people of Ukraine have a double trauma. They have the trauma of the war, and they have the trauma of the previous Soviet occupation, which took away their identity. So we tried to give that back to them. And so we looked at the traditional typologies of housing in the town. And we repaired the main square. This is a drawing by Max von Trott, who is a master of charrettes, who worked also with Ben Pentrieth with DPZ. This is before and after, where the town square is restored to a proper shape. And then we did a series of little spot interventions in key parts of the town. This is around the center of the town, just outside the center. These are key nodes of the town, where at a certain distance where you can, with very, very little, what we did is we proposed very small interventions which they could build themselves. And actually, some of the team have gone, Tomasz Jelinski went back to Zolochiv recently, and he said they are actually starting to implement these themselves. No money needed, practically. So this is one, so before, after, just local typologies. This is another one here. This is an area on the edge of the town where there's a supermarket, and this is a path which the people have made themselves. So it's a kind of desire path. So it's made into a real place. And the outskirts of the town, even today, what they do in Ukraine, when they build a new community, the first thing they build is this. Nothing is there, they build a church. They build a church, and then that generates the community around it. So we made a proposal also for that. And of course, the Soviet blocks, this one is a little bit uncared for and dilapidated. But this was done very quickly. It took us about 3 days to do these projects. So before and after, with covered balconies, greenery, little community gardens. We could add some playgrounds and more stuff here, but this was basically the idea. And then last of all, I'll talk about the summer school that Ettore mentioned that we did in Mexico last year in Oaxaca, which again was an operation of giving identity to a place and giving a sense of belonging to the people. Oaxaca, the center of the town, is very beautiful. It has beautiful Dominican monastery, outstanding architecture, some very interesting archaeological sites around. This is Mitzla, which was a pre-Columbian settlement, which is still active when the Spanish colonialists came in and they built the church inside this town. And this was the site that we had to work with. This was the end of the train line coming into Oaxaca from northern Mexico, from Mexico City. It's the entrance to the city. The whole neighborhood is called the ex-marquesado, the ex-marquise, because it was under the control of Cortez. He was the Marquis of Oaxaca. And so we have this abandoned railway area, but next to on the north side, this is the railway station, which is quite a nice little building. But it's flanked by a very, very busy road on the north side. And more importantly still, on the south side, right next to the railway tracks, this is actually where the railway tracks used to go. It has, what did Miriam call it? The kind of community, spontaneous, informal settlement, that's it. It's a euphemistic way of saying a favela. So a huge informal settlement to the south, right next to the site. So we incorporated this in our project. This is all self-built, shanty town. We incorporated this in the project. We looked at the typologies of the local architecture. Students studied this, plan types of buildings. It was a very difficult project. It was quite a challenging project. We had a lot of opposition from the more middle class people of Oaxaca who said, "Oh, you're proposing colonial architecture." They also have a trauma of the colonization still, which I don't know how true this is, but the coat of arms of Cortez is a series of slaves in chains. The coat of arms of the city of Oaxaca are two arms with chains that are breaking. So they have this very powerful memory of breaking free from the colonists. So we studied we immersed ourselves in 2 weeks in the local identity to study it as much as possible. And the building typology, methods. We also did a workshop. We did a workshop of adobe building, which is shown here. We did a workshop of tile vaulting without centering. So the local building technology. And we designed buildings which can be built by the people, not necessarily by skilled masons or building companies, but by the people. So what we did is we involved and we communicated with the people, the representatives of the informal settlement. We invited them in, and we said, this would be our proposal for your new home. We will gradually build, and then you can move out of the temporary houses you have into these new houses, which you can also contribute to building yourselves. You can be involved in building it yourselves. And so this is the master plan. Here we have the very main road. This is the line of the railway track. And this is where all the informal settlement is. This is the river. This is what it looks like now. So you can see main road into Oaxaca. So this is a one-way street, very double, four-lane, one-way street going in, and then a three-lane, two-lane, one-way street coming out. So cars that don't slow down, just very fast. The train yards and the shanty town. So obviously can be built in phases. And of course, obviously we're referring to the teachings of Léon here with the res publica, the res economica, the civitas, urban sequences. There's just a series of diagrams of how the whole area works. Vehicle circulation, tram. We reinstated not a train as such, but a tram that continues into the city, so connected to the city much more than before. A 5-minute walk radius. Various distances between public spaces, commercial zones, piazzas, meeting spaces, schools, hospital. There's an existing hospital here. We didn't build another one. Green area, obviously, a lot of that. And this is the overall view of what it would look like. This is the main road here. We didn't really touch it that much, but we've completely created quite a large sort of neighborhood here. And despite the doom and gloom that was rained on us by the architecture department of the local city and the middle class intellectuals who said, no, this is your fascist colonials, all the people who lived in the informal settlements, they came to the presentation and they saw this and they loved it, and they felt that it would be possible to make a community for them which they could belong to. So this is our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, as Jonathan said, this was a project that was developed in 2 weeks. In reality, it was less because even in that case, used to be several lectures and also 2 workshops. Those Jonathan mentioned also because one of the ideas was to allow these people to have a kind of a program of self-construction, giving them the know-how of the way they, at the end, are doing. Can I have this? So, moving forward, as I said, we want to give a space to young architect and practitioner. I have the great pleasure of inviting the next speaker, which is another creature of ours, and she, she was a student of mine not a long time ago, and she fell in love with the project we did in the 2nd semester, which is similar to the project we did during the summer school. A project for a landscape design, a project for a villa, because that is what the curriculum of Notre Dame wants to do in the spring semester. And this was, I think, some great shift in her way of approaching architecture, especially landscape design. Indeed, today, Samanta Zhuang, Sam for me, is a landscape designer at the Hirschauer and graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She received her undergraduate education at the University of Notre Dame, where she studied architecture and Italian studies with a focus on traditional architecture and urbanism. By the way, I'm proud because she's also speaking Italian. Her work examines the relationship between topography, architecture, and representation, with a particular interest in how architecture and landscape can work in harmony with a given condition of place. She is the author of Representing Mountaintecture of Tuscan Hill Towns, a design research project exploring the interaction between terrain, built form, and modes of drawing. She's also co-founder of a STOA magazine at a platform for architectural discourse at Notre Dame School of Architecture, and her work spans projects in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. Indeed, I'm grateful to Sam because she invited me for the winter school that was held in Doha during the Christmas break that was led by Lucien and whose result was quite impressive. Please, Sam, thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you to the Accademia Vivarium Novum for the invitation, and for the professors, of course. So, my larger research project, representing the mountaintecture of Tuscan hill towns, investigates how representation shapes the way we perceive, organize, inhabit mountainous urban environments. So, it is a little tacky with the invention of this term, mountaintecture, but bear with me with this humorous take. So currently, the first book on the field observation is complete, and I'm working on the second book that's going to be analyzing history. And the third book is going to apply the learning from the first and second book for a proposal for the future. So in many ways, the work is a counterproposal to the contemporary fascination with megastructures that imitates mountains and terrain through singular monumental objects. Instead, it asks how existing hill towns already negotiate architecture, infrastructure, and ecology collectively over time. By redrawing the historical spatial solutions and by investigating the basis, the biases embedded with our representational tools, I searched for a way of translating hidden traditional knowledge for a broader contemporary audience. So today, I would like to introduce the project through 3 sets of drawings, under 3 lenses: geometry, layer, and scale. But before the categories emerged theoretically, they first emerged experientially. I would especially like to thank Professor Mazzola and Professor Weatherill, who first led me through Siena years ago, and Professor Lucien, who sparked my interest in representation. So I remember arriving in Siena and standing on Camporeggio near the Basilica of San Domenico. Across the Fontebranda Valley, the Duomo appeared like the summit of a mountain, composed of buildings and roads. Yet, by walking into and through this mountain of buildings and streets, I will reach the Duomo within minutes. That experience later led me to investigate how drawings and representations attempt to organize and make sense of these complex 3-dimensional relationships into a 2-dimensional paper space. The first set investigates geometry and ordering of living systems. So the first image is a design of the garden on the island of Cythera. This is from the 1499 print of Hypnerotomachia Polyphili. Landscape here is abstracted into symbolic and geometric relationships, from the outer cemiterio of Bosco to the middle layer of the prati or orchards, to the innermost layer of simple gardens. Living systems of first and second nature become organized through idealized geometry within this constructed literary third nature. Representation here structures how landscape can be conceptually understood. But geometry alone does not create inhabitable environments, as was mentioned many times before. When these literally ideas later take form as built projects, as we can see here in the sketch of Villalante, geometry shifts from the symbolic abstraction towards spatial negotiation. So geometry and terrain begin to negotiate continuously throughout the journey from nature to culture. There are terraces, bosco, architecture, water, and planting coordinated, and the trace of artistic intervention increases. But geometry here is enforced through immense labor and care in modifying and maintaining the growing hedges and gridded orchard planting. The Renaissance garden villa here illustrates a negotiated environment between cultural and ideals in organic growth. And the living system will always resist static order. Richard Foreman's land mosaic explains this relationship. This diagram showcases how planned and unplanned systems can overlap dynamically. Ecological processes rarely obey rigid geometry. Geometry becomes only one of the many contributing factors that cooperates with the larger living system. So these precedents helped me interpret Siena itself. Planometrically, I remember the gates and parts of the city in relation to the centers through this idealized geometry, but the city itself operates through overlapping systems. There are the city walls and gates in relation to Via Francigena, there are natural topography, there are different levels of financial and cultural alliances of Terzi, Castellari, and Monti. And there are neighborhoods of Contrada. So the city itself is not reducible to a singular ideal form. The circular ideal never fully resolves into rigid order because physical constraints on ground continuously modify the abstracted geometry. In this sense, decorum is more than the rigid geometry or strict order. It emerges through the negotiated relationships between a symbolic order, terrain, ecology, and lived space. It is a continuously evolving and non-static pursuit. The second set investigates the representation through layers, and we're going through the case study of San Gimignano. Layer can emerge from cutting sections, composing transects, and overlaying territorial projection. In Humboldt's cross-section of the Chimborazo mountain, the impossible complexity of mountain becomes manageable through representational sectioning. Climate, vegetation, geology, and altitude are compressed into one synthetic image. Through the imaginary sectional drawing, the mountain, previously perceived as a field condition, becomes a mountain, a freestanding object. But the desire to make territory legible through representation long predates modern science. Lorenzetti's allegory and effects of good and bad government operates like a horizontal territorial transect. Here, urban markets, agriculture, productive labor, and governance become linked within one continuous representational field. The long drawings across walls in the Palazzo Pubblico makes it evident that urban and rural systems depend upon one another economically, socially, and spatially. Representation, therefore, becomes not only descriptive, but also political. So this is Lanciani's Forma Ubis reconstructs territory through selective layering. You have the contemporary intervention, the Republican time, the imperial time, and medieval times archaeological remains, differentiated through color, line weight, and graphic hierarchy. Different temporal layers of the city become simultaneously visible. So you can see what survives, what disappeared, and what was reconstructed, and what remained uncertain. These layered representational systems become especially helpful in understanding San Gimignano. My archival study suggests that San Gimignano's 13th century second enclosure may have been shaped not only by topography and defense, but also by symbolic projection associated with Emperor Frederick II and the Ghibelline alliance. The enclosure has been interpreted as an imperial ego, where the Montes da Foli and the Castrum Vetus forming the head and the body, and you have the neighborhood of San Giovanni and San Matteo extend outwards as wings of the ego. The architectural sectional logic is important in modern territorial representation. Modern technologies such as GIS, photogrammetry, and section elevations similarly provides a way to cut through territory and transform landscape into legible objects of analysis. But it is a process that risks oversimplification. Decorum thus becomes legible through thoughtful representation. Representations are not neutral. They shape how territories are perceived, inhabited, restored, and remembered. And then we have our third case study, which brings us to Montepulciano. The final set investigates scale and the relationship between architecture and terrain. The Tower of Babel represents one long-standing architectural fascination, the desire to construct architecture as a mountain. Here, architecture attempts to become terrain through singular monumental ambition, but other relationships between architecture and mountains are possible. So in this Da Vinci's bird-eye view of Western Tuscany, mountains and settlements begin to appear reciprocally. Abstracted towns represented as objects situated within the territorial landforms. Architecture and the cities here are represented as abstracted objects, but understood regionally rather than as isolated objects. And in this E.S. Escher's drawing of Goriano Sicuri, architecture and mountain become one inseparable collective. There are smaller scale buildings with different forms and roof fitted into the terrain, connected by retaining walls, stairs, and vegetation. The town behaves less like a singular architectural object and more like a continuous inhabitation of landscape. These precedents help me interpret Montepulciano as a series of linear urban interiors embedded within the terrain with its high town, mid-town, and low town. Walking from Porta a Prato towards Piazza Grande, the town unfolds itself sequentially along the contours of the hill. You have narrow alleyways branch outwards like windows within a facade, one side opening towards distant valleys, and the other towards retaining walls, stairways, and stepped gardens. The building details that made the urban interiors possible are careful topographical designs that evolved over time through inhabitation and adaptation. So you've got the skillful stairs, you have the scalinatas, you have the terraced piazzetta splitting the streets, and you have piazza and you have the streets that becomes a piazzetta. And then you have piazza and counter piazza in the public connect ways. So the mountaintecture emerges not through singular monumental objects, but through accumulated relationships between landscape, architecture, and social life. In this sense, decorum requires humility and courage with scale. It is important to understand the scale of human architecture in relation to the scale of terrain. The architecture of nature, or what some might understand as the architecture of God. So, perhaps the task today is not to imitate mountains through ever larger architectural objects, but to relearn how to read, represent, and build with terrain thoughtfully. The hill towns remind us that decorum is not achieved through domination over landscape, but through continuous negotiation with it. And perhaps this is also where beauty regains civic meaning, not as a nostalgic image or subjective preference, but as a visible expression of fitting relationships between a place and the built form. So for architects and urbanists, this may require shifting attention away from isolated formal objects and towards the long-term stewardship through terrain, inhabitation, ecology, and architecture. And so there's the whole book, and if you want to take a photo of the link, you can read about like all the descriptions of different ways of representation and how that's been shaping me to think of how to analyze the history of the three cities and think of a proposal for the future. So the presentation itself is more of a research project. So that's not like a proposal project, but it repeats a lot of the points that had been iterated about how geometry itself is not a proposal, and understanding the scale of architecture and urbanism, and also understanding the living system versus a static image, which is only serving as a starting point. So with some time, I can also go through very quickly some of the projects that I've done in the past that leads me to this point and the contemplation on representation and how to bridge this communication mismatch about how we should proceed forward and how we can carry the lessons from the past with us going into the future. So the first project is, of course, a mountain town that I was able to develop with Professor Duani's studio. And this was the Villa Garden that Professor Mazzola was mentioning, where they're the formal documented way to understand how topographical changes can be managed through the building. So that's the plan. And then there was my thesis on gasometro that takes interest in repairing industrial ruins with lessons from classical architecture like the Trajan's Market, and then leads to the cemetery park design, where I apply lessons from music scoring about the speed of proceeding and also the strongness or the quietness of the spaces in a literal way to make this festina lente way of mourning and remembering and different speeds of going through the life of the soil, the tree, and human life. And also my work with an ecologist on wetland restoration. So there was the plan for cranberry bogs and illegal sand mining sites. And there's a more technical way of applying topographical manipulations to restore a lot of the species and the sedimental processes. And then there was a proposal for a neighborhood of Gunayala community along the Panama Canal, but on the Caribbean side. There's a phased development that challenges kind of the policies that we've seen, and the red one is like the proposed relocation that really defies how the organic city grows. So different ways of understanding how it went wrong and how we can repair that through understanding the community crafts and policies that's human-centric and based on how we can make programs for individuals to attend and making the spaces. Yeah, so that's kind of the lineage of thoughts that leads me to wanting to find a way to find better ways of understanding representation, of communicating the knowledge from past and communicating that to a broader audience.
It is always a great pleasure to see your creature growing. Jonathan mentioned Garbatella, mentioned Gustavo Giovannoni. The great achievement of Garbatella is based on the research made by Giovannoni, who spent many of his years of studying the dynamics of the development of urban settlements, districts, cities in Italy and abroad, in order to understand what were the positive and the negative aspects, for instance, of Garden City, since he was in charge to design the Garbatella in Città Giardino Aniene. And as Gustavo Giovannoni, Plinio Marconi spent a lot of his life working, analyzing the kind, let's say the character of the cities around Viterbo, especially Vitorchiano, when after the exhibition of 1911, it was decided that probably the region of Viterbo was the more representative of the character of the language of the architecture of Lazio. And Giovannoni, more than 100 years ago, arrived to a very similar point of the one of Léon. Léon was talking about the 10-minute walk, and Gustavo Giovannoni demonstrated with real data that every settlement was reaching a maximum diameter of 800 to 1,000 meters, and then they were building another one nearby. And he was talking about natural multiplication and duplication of self-sufficient settlement. So this is the reason why the research of Sam, to me, is very important, because this shows that the fact that there are theory, the fact that there are great research that are made already by our predecessor doesn't mean that everything has been carefully studied and understood. And we, instead of imagining some hypothetical future, as unfortunately it is happening nowadays, many times it's better to watch behind and see if lectures of great achievement of the past can give us the right way to go forward. Even the work of Miriam was showing the great research on these outstanding sites of Mexico that, if would have been taken by the Venetian, probably would have been better, because they know how to work on a lagoon and water. So I don't know if you have any questions for the speakers we had this morning. Let me know, or I can anticipate what is going to happen in the rest of the day. Any questions? No? Yes, Jonathan.
Well, it's not really a question, it's just an observation, which is quite obvious for Miriam. It's very telling to me how it was clearly impossible for her scheme to have cars. It was not accessible. You can only get to a place you can only get to by water, which is very interesting, I think. This is so there's not even a bridge, or it's very specifically a water settlement. Yeah.
So probably something that I should have mentioned before is that when I was analyzing the existing situation of Xochimilco, I noticed that what happens is that once you have an Chinampa connecting to mainland, the demographic explodes. So it is very difficult to control how many people are living there. So that is why I made the decision to make this urban model detached from mainland.
Thank you. Yes, Matthew, please. Come.
I have also a question for Miriam. Grazie. I have also a question for Miriam, very quickly. I didn't quite understand from your presentation whether you were rebuilding Mexico City as a series of canals and pavilions, or whether this is a new development. So, thank you.
So, yes, the idea is to regenerate Xochimilco itself. Later on, to recover the canals that were covered right now within the city. So, yeah, that is it. Thank you.
In regards to Jonathan's presentation, we know the Industrial Revolution was the start of the destruction of what the society was before, because you have the agrarian communities, then all of a sudden the factory became the firm, right? So the city around the factory became the firm. It seems, in my point of view, since that period, even till today, we're stuck in a formulation that doesn't advance the problem of space and living for people. And I sometimes just question why we don't go back further to the Byzantine Empire, the early Chinese empires, and maybe even some of the Muslim societies where they had urban problems going back 2,000 to 3,000 years ago that they solved, and also incorporated a lot of nature into their structure.
Yeah, I mean, going back to past successful models is obviously very has been the way to do it. I mean, the thing is that the Garden City movement lost power because it was taken over by commercial developers, really. The risk at the moment is actually that the same thing happens, because new urbanism, Léon Krier's theories mirror and they repropose and perfect, let's say, some of the theories of the Garden City, some of early 20th century urban theory, Giovannoni, Camillo Sitta, obviously. And already we're seeing the results of its success. You know, the successful model of living becomes a victim of its own success, almost always, because when Poundbury was starting to be built, it was ridiculed. Prince Charles was, "Oh, you're just dreaming. This is a silly idea. It looks like Disneyland." And as it became successful, people realized, "Oh, maybe he was right." And developers took the model. You know, they said, "This is a great model. We can do this as well." And so you have huge commercial developers in England who are building, sort of theoretically, kind of copying the aspect, at least, or the model of Poundbury, but not really understanding it and taking out all the good parts of it. So you always risk this. You have a push to something very positive. It couldn't be, you know, looking back to the Byzantines or whatever you look back to. You have a push to something very positive, and then as it gains momentum and becomes more mainstream, it obviously gets eroded by people who are exploiting it for their own gain, and so it's a constant battle. It's a up and down all the time. It never finishes. So.
Thank you, and thanks to all the speakers on this really interesting and exciting panel. And I have a question for Miriam, a question for Jonathan, and kudos for Samanta. I don't see she's in the front. Well, first of all, Samanta, thank you so much for safeguarding us against nostalgia. That's very important. I think you are proposing and working out a very interesting, future-oriented, yet heritage-rich approach to space. That's really great. Thank you. Miriam, I want to ask you about the other interest groups behind this project who were involved or not involved, I don't know. Specifically, are there any indigenous communities that were involved in thinking through the history, the methods of construction, and embedding this resurrection reconstruction project in actual pre-colonial or parallel colonial histories, right? So it's essentially a question about decolonization of the contemporary project. And maybe for Jonathan, quickly, it's really wonderful to hear that beauty is not in the building, in the state of the building, but in the belonging that it produces. But a few times you mentioned that many of the buildings that have a strong sense of attachment are not in good shape. So it seems to me that material properties are not of the greatest importance. Then what? Or how do they work? Or how would you explain this phenomenon?
Well, I mean, just to start myself, then I'll pass to Miriam. I mean, material properties aren't the most important aspect of a successful place. Obviously, the Gavotel is not made of reinforced concrete. It's masonry and render, and it's very cheaply built. It's social housing, so the authorities that maintained it didn't have the money necessary to do the maintenance you would do to a high-level residential neighborhood. But what is important is that it has such an architectural and urban character. It is resilient to this. It doesn't need, even if it's not in the best of shape, it still maintains its character, and the people who live there still have a pride in the place, and they put flowers and they tend the gardens. But if your architecture, if your urban design has to depend upon constant high-level maintenance to maintain its validity, it's a failed model. And I can show you many examples. I didn't go on to this a long way, but I mean, in modern high-end residential developments, their success depends almost purely on very expensive constant landscaping, very expensive constant maintenance, cleaning, 24-hour surveillance. Without that, you have the example that you have in Scampia or the Corviale, which just becomes a dystopic prison for people to live in, because when that decays, it's already not nice to start with. When it decays, it's terrifying. So if you can build simply, cheaply, but with dignity, it doesn't matter if there are cracks in the wall or the plaster is peeling off. It's still beautiful.
Then I add something, but...
You, go ahead. On the same thought.
On the same thought, it's necessary to know what is happening in this district built by the Istituto per le Case Popolari, because the largest part of this building are still belonging to the Istituto per le Case Popolari. The Istituto per le Case Popolari, due to the construction of monstrosities like Corviale, had a bankruptcy. They changed the name from Istituto Case Popolari to Istituto Autonomo per le Case Popolari, and now is ATER, Agenzia Territoriale per l'Edilizia Residenziale. And they are still in bankruptcy because of the costs of construction of the monstrosity that were presented as the fastest and the cheapest way to build the buildings. That's why when I wrote my book, The Sustainable City is Possible, I published the results of 10 years of analysis I did in the archives, documenting with the real bottom line costs, the real costs of construction of those districts like Garbatella, building by building, and Corviale, showing that these buildings built 100 years ago were built with the costs that are arriving up to 60% less than current cost of construction. But if we consider that their performance in terms of energy, in terms of heating and refreshing this building, could be compared to those of the so-called bioarchitecture of LEED architecture, which costs roughly 10-15% more, we can say that these buildings costs were roughly up to 71% less than current cost of construction. The big difference is that those buildings cost zero in terms of maintenance, and while Corviale, since 1982 when it was finished, when I made this estimation in 2010, the cost of maintenance for nothing, basically, because it's still in horrible condition, were close by to 50 million euros only for the maintenance. Now, because of the bankruptcy of the Istituto per le Case Popolari, many of those houses are offered in auctions. They give, obviously, the possibility to the present inhabitants to buy with low costs to become proprietor of the houses, also because many of the people that are living in these districts no longer has the right to live in this building, but they can be kicked out. So they offer for very reasonable prices these houses. When those people don't want or they can't buy these houses, they are going to the auction. And recently, the auction for the building in lot number 24 that was designed in 1 month and built in 4 months as a demonstrative block of Garbatella, I'm not kidding, this building built in 4 months and never restored since 1929, the cost of the apartment there was 11,000 euro per square meter. So what is missing there is the color, but the plaster, the walls are in a perfect shape. So the material are extremely durable because there is no one grain of cement. It's a lime mortar made with lime and pozzolana, which is getting stronger and stronger if it is exposed to water, to humidity, differently from a modern concrete that being a salt created into a kiln starting from the carbonate of calciums tends to have a kind of revenge of nature and going back to the status of carbonate of calcium, whose cell is thicker than the one of the silicate of calcium. And this is the reason why modern buildings are cracking while the old buildings are surviving. So those buildings are built with incredibly durable material, also because the builders of those days, like Quadrio Pirani, when he was building buildings in bricks, he wrote in 1911, we need to build with a durable material like bricks and tiles, because this is going to reduce or even eliminate the future cost of maintenance, and this is extremely important, especially when we are dealing with the public buildings.
Just want to say very quickly something, and then I'll pass to Miriam. Ettore raised an issue which obviously we didn't talk about, which is gentrification, and even obviously something like the Garbatella is itself a victim of its own success, because now, as you said, you have very low-cost housing which is reselling at 11,000 euros per square meter. The reason for this is because it's rare. It's the only example. The solution to this is to build more of it. Just build beautiful places. And why does it need to be so rare? It should be everywhere, and then there's no need for gentrification.
Thank you. So I guess there are some private initiatives working with Xochimilco, but that's the problem. They're private, so they do not ensure any community ties. I don't know if that I answer your question. I do? Okay.
Also because it's a thesis project.
This is a research project and thesis. I mean, everything, as someone said yesterday, starts with an idea. Hopefully, we can save Xochimilco, but I mean, from the maps that I was looking at just recently, a couple of months ago, I mean, probably Xochimilco will disappear within the next decade. It's pretty sad. Yeah.
Do you want to reply to? Well, I think this message or this phrase made by Miriam is also bringing to something that is very important, because what is happening in Mexico City, it is the consequence of the land consumption of the last century. That is something insane, because we consume much more land than in the previous 3 millennia. There are a lot of issues to be taken in consideration in order not only to recover the canals of Xochimilco, but also to think about that we need to unpave this planet as much as we can, because the more we pave, the more we consume land, the more we worsening the climate change, because the paving surfaces are damaging the natural circulation of the air, especially during the night. So it's necessary to think about some recompacting of cities, starting from projects like these. So This research at the end are, to me, to be interpreted as the only possible future we have. I remember when Paolo Marconi visited Notre Dame for a jury, and he left the building saying, "Oh, you are futurist." And I was thinking he was kidding. And he said, you can't imagine how serious I am, because this is the only possible future we have. We need to revisit our lifestyle. We need to revisit the way of building. And only, as we said yesterday, changing the way of teaching, we can change the way of building, and obviously we can save the planet. I think it was some question. It's Diru? Yes.
It's really a comment, but I recall after Ettore was talking about building with traditional materials, Leo and I were in Ahmedabad looking at the 4 buildings by Corbusier, and also looking at the management school by Lou Kahn. And at the school, Lou Kahn, before they started building, had a demonstration arch made out of brick, and all the different arch dimensions that he was incorporating into the design. And you might recall that this is a set of buildings with very large circular brick openings and series of arches. And there had been an earthquake a couple of years before our visit. Now, the engineers in India did not believe Lou Kahn when he said that the brick would withstand. So his demonstration piece was there. After the earthquake, it was in perfect condition, but the actual buildings, which had steel in them, had all cracked. So the ones that he had built initially without steel were just fine. And so it was able to withstand, a 7 scale earthquake without any damage.
Thank you very much. There is any other question? No. Okay, so as I said at the beginning of this session, this is a conference not only for architects that I call black masses, but is a place where we have experts of other disciplines that are going to talk. And this afternoon we have a very interesting session with an expert of neuroscience and urban sociology. It will be quite let's say, relaxing day today, because we are going to restart at 4:30, so you can take a rest and think about what you have absorbed during this day and a half of talk, and we will meet again at 4:30 here. But now, obviously, you are kindly invited to go downstairs for the lunch.